When my son stopped calling me mom, it didn't happen suddenly. There wasn't a fight, or shouting, or any broken plates on the floor. It happened quietly, like the sound of a door closing softly behind someone you love, and realizing it may never open the same way again. That morning, I stood by the kitchen window, waiting to hear his voice like I used to. "Good morning, Mom," he'd say, every day since he was little, even when he was late for school. But now, years later, as I poured coffee for 2 out of habit, the silence told me everything. He was married now. He lived just 20 miles away. But to me, it felt like another world. People told me, that's how life works. Children grow up. They have their own lives. And I smiled, nodded, pretended to understand. But deep down, I didn't. Because a mother doesn't stop being a mother when her son grows up. She just becomes quieter about it. That day, the day my son called me by my first name, I realized something had changed forever. Soft pause, faint piano chord. I didn't cry right away. I smiled. I told myself, maybe it's nothing. Maybe he's just joking. But deep inside, I felt something small and fragile break. I still remember the first time I held him. He was so small, his fingers barely wrapped around mine. They say a mother's love begins when she feels the baby move inside her. But for me, it began the moment I saw his eyes open for the first time. He didn't cry much. He just stared, wide-eyed, curious, quiet. And that silence, that calmness, stayed with him as he grew up. I named him Rohan. It was his father's choice, but I loved how it sounded, soft, gentle, like a whisper in prayer. Rohan grew up in a small house filled with laughter. We didn't have much, but we had time for each other. Evenings were spent at the dining table, where his father would talk about his day, and I would listen while serving food. Rohan would always sit beside me, his little hand resting on my arm. "Mom," he used to say, "when I grow up, I'll buy you a big house. You won't have to work anymore." And I would laugh, brush his hair aside, and tell him, "I don't need a big house, Beta. Just promise me you'll never stop talking to me." He promised. Children always do. Life was simple then, full of small routines that felt eternal. His father worked as a mechanic, often tired, but proud. I stitched clothes from home to add a little more to our income. Sometimes, at night, I'd stay awake watching Rohan sleep. I used to whisper, "You're my heart walking outside my body." He'd roll over in his sleep, and I'd smile. When Rohan turned 12, things began to change, not in a bad way, just life moving faster. He became more independent, more quiet. He started spending time with his friends, bringing home little secrets he no longer shared with me. That's how growing up starts, slowly, gently, like fog rolling over a field. His father passed away when Rohan was 16. A sudden heart attack. We were sitting in the hospital waiting room when the doctor came out and said those words that never leave a person's soul. I didn't cry right away. I looked at my son instead. He stood there, frozen. His eyes searching for an answer. That night, when we came home, Rohan hugged me tight. For hours, neither of us said anything. In that silence, I realized, we were all each other had now. After that, life became a rhythm of survival. I started taking more sewing work. Rohan began college. He studied hard, determined to make his father proud. Even when he was busy, he always made time for me. He'd call from the hostel every night, just to say, "Good night, Mom." Some nights it was just 2 minutes, but those 2 minutes were my world. Then came the day he brought home a girl, Mira. She was polite, sweet, the kind of young woman any mother would like. She helped me serve tea, asked about my health, even called me auntie with respect. I could see why Rohan liked her. But something inside me, a quiet, wordless fear, began to stir. Not because she was bad. No. But because I knew what marriage does. I had seen it in my own family. A mother becomes a visitor in her child's new world. Still, I smiled and said, "She's lovely, Rohan. I'm happy for you." And I meant it. Happiness and fear, sometimes they live together in a mother's heart. When he got married, I stood in the temple watching him place sindoor on her forehead. Everyone clapped, the music played, and I smiled for photos. But behind every smile, there was a quiet prayer. Please don't let her take him away from me. After the wedding, they moved into a new flat not far from my house. Rohan promised he'd visit every Sunday. And for a while, he did. He'd bring groceries, fix the fan, and we'd drink tea together. But slowly, the visits grew shorter. Then they became less frequent. Phone calls became text messages. And one day, even those stopped. I told myself, he's busy. Married life is new. I shouldn't disturb him. Still, I waited. Every Sunday, I'd cook his favorite dal, just in case he came. Some Sundays the food went cold on the table. I'd pack it away quietly, telling myself maybe next week. When neighbors asked, "How's Rohan doing?" I'd smile and say, "Oh, he's doing great. Always working hard." Because no mother ever admits she's been forgotten. And yet, every night, when I saw his childhood photo on the shelf, the one where he's holding my hand and grinning, I felt a small ache in my chest. Soft music swells, image cue, a flickering candle beside framed photos on a wooden table. That ache became my companion. It followed me through quiet afternoons and sleepless nights. It sat beside me when I ate alone. And yet, I never stopped praying for his happiness. Because that's what mothers do, they love even through absence. The first time I realized Rohan was slipping away wasn't when he stopped calling. It was when I stopped expecting him to. It happened so quietly, so naturally, that I almost didn't notice. Weeks turned into months. The Sundays became silent. I would still wake up early, clean the house, and cook his favorite poha. I'd check my phone every hour, pretending I wasn't waiting. But inside, I always was. Sometimes, I'd dial his number, just to hear his voice on the ringtone, then hang up before he answered. I told myself, he must be busy. That's what mothers do. We find reasons to forgive before there's even an apology. One evening, I finally decided to visit him. I carried a box of sweets, his favorite, son papdi, and took the bus to his new apartment. The ride felt long. My hands trembled the whole way. I kept wondering if he'd be happy to see me, or if I should have called first. When I reached, Mira opened the door. She smiled, politely, not warmly. "Oh, Auntie. You came. Rohan's not home yet." "He's at work," she said. I nodded. "That's all right, I just wanted to drop these off. I made some sweets." She hesitated. Just for a second. Then she said, "That's so nice of you, but actually, we're trying to cut down on sugar." Her tone was gentle, but her eyes told me I wasn't expected. Still, I smiled. "Just keep it for later. He always liked these as a child." She took the box and placed it on the table, not like a gift, but like something that didn't belong. I sat down for a few minutes, talking about small things. The weather. Her work. The new curtains. But she kept glancing at the clock. When Rohan finally came home, his surprise looked more like confusion. "Mom. You didn't tell me you were coming," he said. I smiled and said, "I wanted to surprise you." He hugged me quickly, then sat beside Mira. They talked about dinner plans, work, things I didn't quite understand. And I sat there, quiet, listening to my own silence. When I stood up to leave, Rohan said, "Mom, next time just call, okay? You know, we have such a packed schedule." I nodded. "Of course, Beta. I will." But as I walked back home, the rain started to fall, light and cold, and I realized something had shifted. It wasn't anger. It wasn't rejection. It was distance. A distance so quiet, it felt like a whisper between two hearts that once beat together. soft violin fades in. Over the next few months, I saw him only twice. Once at a family wedding, where he arrived late, sat in a corner, and left early. And once when Mira's parents came to visit and invited me for dinner. I remember how proud he looked introducing them. He said, "Mom, this is Mira's father, Mr. Kapoor, he's in finance." And I smiled and said, "Oh, nice to meet you." But when he said, "This is my mother, she stays nearby," something broke inside me. Not my mom, not my ama, not even this is my mother who raised me alone. Just she stays nearby. I smiled through it. I always do. But that night, when I came home, I sat in the dark for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just felt something fade, slowly, like the last ember in a dying fire. After that, I tried to stay busy. I joined a small stitching group with neighborhood women. We'd sew together, talk, laugh a little. But whenever someone mentioned their children, how they called, visited, sent photos, I'd quietly look away. I started saying things like, "Oh, my son is so busy these days. He's doing well." Or, "He's grown so responsible after marriage." Because if I didn't say those words out loud, the silence would have swallowed me. Then came my birthday. I had no plans, just a simple dinner for myself. I cooked paleo and lit a small candle near the photo of his father. I told myself, he'll call. I waited until midnight. The phone never rang. The next morning, a message came. "Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry, been crazy busy. We'll visit soon." That word, soon, became my new hope. Soon meant maybe next week. Maybe next month. Maybe never. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I heard a knock. When I opened the door, it was the postman. He handed me an envelope, Rohan's handwriting. Inside was a card that said, "To Mom, with love." No note. No call. Just those 4 words. I held that card for hours. Not because of what it said, but because of what it didn't. Sound cue, ticking clock, faint wind through window curtains. Months passed, and I started learning to live in that silence. I'd water my plants, make tea for one, talk to my husband's photo now and then. And sometimes, late at night, I'd whisper, "I hope he's eating well. I hope he's happy." But one evening changed everything. I was at the grocery store when I ran into an old friend of Rohan's, Amit. He looked surprised. "Auntie. It's been ages. How's Rohan Bia?" I smiled. "He's fine. Busy with work and married life." Amit's smile faded. "Oh, didn't you go to their new housewarming last month?" My hands froze. "What housewarming?" I asked. He looked confused. "Oh, maybe it was small. Mira posted pictures, it looked nice. You should have seen the decor." I laughed softly, trying to hide the sting. Maybe they wanted to keep it simple. But that night, when I sat alone, I finally cried. Not out of anger. Not out of jealousy. But out of realization that somewhere along the way, I had become a guest in my own child's life. He had built a new home. A new world. And I was no longer part of its foundation. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would stop waiting. I would stop counting the days, checking the phone, or pretending it didn't hurt. I would start learning how to live with the silence, instead of fighting it. But learning that wasn't easy. Some nights, I'd still cook for 2, out of habit. I'd still turn to speak to someone who wasn't there. And I'd still smile when people said, "You must be so proud." Because I am. Even when it hurts, I am proud of him. He became everything. When I returned home that night, the silence of my small rented room felt heavier than ever. I sat by the window, looking at the empty street. The streetlight flickered outside, and for a long time I just watched the light come and go. It reminded me of my son's love, once bright, now distant, uncertain. I placed my small handbag on the table and noticed the lunchbox I had packed for him that morning still inside. I had taken it with me, hoping I might hand it over to him if I got the chance. But I didn't. I opened it slowly, and the food had turned cold and dry. Still, I sat there eating a few bites alone. It tasted like memories, bland, but comforting in a way only a mother could understand. For days after that, I didn't hear from my son. No message, no call. I tried not to expect anything, but mothers don't stop waiting, not for words, not for warmth. Every vibration of my phone made my heart race, only to be disappointed again and again. One evening, I found myself walking past his house. I told myself I was just out for a walk, but my feet led me there anyway. The lights were on. I could see their silhouettes through the curtains, my son, his wife, and their little boy. They were laughing, maybe watching TV. I stood there for a moment, hidden behind a tree. It wasn't jealousy I felt. It was more like relief. He had his own life now. He was happy. That's what I had always wanted, right? Still, a small ache stayed in my chest, the ache of being replaced by new priorities, by the natural flow of life that pushes mothers to the background once their children build their own worlds. I turned back home quietly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I looked through old photo albums, his first birthday, his school plays, his graduation. I traced his little face on each picture with my finger. I whispered to the photos, "You're still my boy." The next morning, something changed in me. I realized that I couldn't keep living in yesterday. My love for him didn't depend on how often he called me. It didn't vanish because he stopped saying Mom. A mother's heart doesn't break completely, it bends, it learns, it grows softer. I started filling my days differently. I began volunteering at a local shelter, serving food to elderly people who had no one to visit them. On the first day, an old woman grabbed my hand and said, "Thank you, dear." Her eyes were full of the same loneliness I had seen in my own. In her, and in others, I saw reflections of myself. And strangely, helping them helped me heal. Every thank you, every smile, felt like a patch mending the small tears in my heart. One afternoon, while serving tea, I saw a young boy helping his grandmother walk. I couldn't help but smile. That sight gave me hope that maybe somewhere in the cycle of life, kindness still flows down generations. Maybe one day, my son would teach his child to love and respect the same way I once taught him. Weeks turned into months. I learned to enjoy the quiet. I began gardening again, planting marigolds and tulips on the windowsill. Watching them bloom reminded me that life continues, even after pain. Then one morning, my phone buzzed. It was my son. My hands trembled as I answered. "Mom," he said softly. That one word, after so long, melted every wall I had built inside me. I didn't scold him, didn't ask why he hadn't called earlier. I just listened. "Mom, I'm sorry," he continued. "I didn't realize how far I drifted away from you. I've been busy, and I let it get in the way. Can I come see you this weekend?" I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. "Of course, son. Come home." When he arrived, he hugged me, really hugged me. His son followed behind, shyly handing me a small card that said, "I love you, Grandma." I couldn't hold back my tears. It felt like the universe had returned a piece of my heart I thought I'd lost forever. We sat together for hours that day. We didn't talk about the past, didn't reopen wounds. We just talked, about his work, his son's school, small things. Normal things. And in that normalcy, I found peace. Before leaving, my daughter-in-law came up to me and said quietly, "I'm sorry too. I didn't realize I was keeping him away. I hope you'll forgive me." I smiled. "You don't need to ask for forgiveness. Life teaches all of us in its own time." That night, after they left, I sat by the same window where I had once cried in silence. this time I smiled. I realized that love, when it's real, always finds its way back, maybe late, maybe quietly, but it returns. Peace, I learned, doesn't come from being needed. It comes from understanding that you gave your best, and that's enough. From that day, I stopped waiting for his calls. Because now, even if he forgot to call, my heart was calm. I had found a new kind of peace, not in their voices, but in my own acceptance. Sometimes I still whisper his name while watering the plants, or when I see children playing on the street. But it no longer hurts. It feels warm, like a gentle memory. And when I hear other mothers at the shelter talk about their loneliness, I tell them softly. Don't wait for them to remember. Just love them silently. That's the purest kind of love. Because that's what motherhood truly is, a quiet prayer, whispered into the universe, even when no one listens. That night, before sleeping, I looked at the stars and said, "Thank you, life. You took a lot from me, but you gave me peace in return." And I slept without tears for the first time in years.